In this video, we are going to talk about top 10 most commonly asked JavaScript interview question, and these are the code interview questions. So I have sourced this list from the LinkedIn post from the people who has appeared for the front-end developer interview recently, and it's their feedback. So let's see what they are. Number one, give the final output value of the nested object like this. So for example, if you have an array like this where you have a nested hierarchy a b c d, if I do a dot b dot c dot d, I should get an final output value. So let's write a code for this. First thing, I'm going to create a nested object and provide the values like what we wanted. And then what we are going to do is we are going to extract the key. And for each of the keys, in my keys, I'm going to iterate over them, and then I'm going to see if it has a furthermore keys inside it. Then I'm going to assign it to the next output. If it's not, then simply undefined. If I run this, you can see that I get a value for the abc.d. Number two, flatten the array recursively and interactively. And this was even asked in the Facebook's coding interview question. So we have to flatten the array. So given if you have an array like this, you have to provide a result like this. So let's write a code. So first is a naive approach in which we are going to write a function. That function will work recursively, and it's going to parse through all the elements, and it's going to return them. So we will create one constant flat array in which we are going to push the result, and we are going to iterate over each of the items. And if that element is of an array again, then we will call the flatten method again. The method calls itself again, and the result will be pushed into our constant flat, which is going to be our final result. And if there is no nested array in it, then it will simply push the item into and return it. There we go, it has flattened the array, and you can see result is a plain single dimensional array. This is the naive approach. We can do this with the ES6 in a smarter way. So there is a method called flat, and if I call this and will so now you can see that if I call a flat method, it is working on only one level. So for that, we need to provide an one argument to a flat method. That argument decide how much level you want to look into your nesting hierarchy. This time I will get a flattened response from the secondary nesting level also. But at a runtime, we don't know how many levels in our nested array is going to be. So the safer way is to put the infinity there, which will basically it will look into whatever level you have in your array, and this will give you one correct. Number three, implement a debounce and throttle in JavaScript. So first, let's understand what is a debounce. So debounce is a technique that limits the execution of function to only occur after a specified period of inactivity. If the function is called again within that period, the timer will reset. For example, I have set the timer as a 500 milliseconds, and if in that 500 millisecond the function is called twice, then the timer will reset, and it will allow only to perform execution of function after a 500 milliseconds. So let's write a debounce function which takes a function and the delay as argument. Delay is a time, and let's declare a timeout ID, and it will return a function that has an arguments in it, and there's a clear timeout. So clear timeout, basically it's a clear timeout ID where we set timeout for the whatever time has been passed to it, and this applies to the arguments that are present in this function. And then we will handle the input. So we are just going to invoke in this handle input method. So console log input value, and the debounce handle input will call the debounce handle input is the function or the method in which whatever is a set of instruction that you want to do after that debounce time. So if I call this twice now, the debounce handle input, it will only execute the last one because the debounce time was set 500 milliseconds. So it's going to give me input world because in the 500 milliseconds the last execution was for the second line, not for the first. That's why. So unlike a debounce, throttle allows you to execute a function at most once in a given period of time, and there is one flag inside it which is throttle. If the function is called once, that flag is set to true. If it is not, then it is set to false. So throttle is the function which has the timeout ID, and is throttle is a flag which basically tells if it's throttle or not, and then it returns a function with the argument that if it is throttle, then it will simply return that it doesn't have to execute it. It will simply return. But if it is not throttle, then we are setting the is throttle to a true, then the function apply. Basically we are setting a timeout again, and the is throttle will be false this time, and there is a delay that we have accepted. After that delay, the execution of the function will happen. Now we need to provide a handler. Handler is a method which will perform a certain action. So throttle handle scroll is something that we are doing, like it's a scroll event, and then we are going to call the throttle handle scroll thrice in 100 milliseconds, and this will output a scroll event only once because the execution of the first call was executed immediately, and the subsequent calls are throttle and ignore. So this is where if our is throttle, if the execution has happened, then this will return and it will not perform. So if I run it, I can say that the scroll event is console logged only once and not the thrice. Number four, we have to return a sum of n arguments using a currying function like sum of a or B, C, or whatever n, it should return a summation of all that arguments. So we can accomplish this using occurring in the JavaScript. So I will create a function sum where I will have a arrow function for a variable v, which will return a summation of n and x, and the value of is the method from the JavaScript that I am again passing. Like if I have more arguments into my occurring function, then it will simply return a same a function that is a summation of nx plus s. So it becomes like an recursion. Now if I do a console log and the sum of 1 2 3, I don't get an actual response. The problem is that we are calling a function and it returns a function itself. So in order to convert the response of that function into a numeric value, we have to add a plus, which basically operate in the JavaScript, which converts the value to numeric. So this time if I call it, I can get a response. Number 5, deep equal, like if nested objects are same or not. So how to check if the nested object are same or not? So there are 5 different ways to accomplish this, and you can write your own is deep equal function like this, where it will check for the nested objects and will work recursively. But we are going to do it this in a smarter way. If I have 2 objects like this, I can do an stringify of a first object and the stringify of the second object, and this will basically do a comparison on the string unlike of the objects. If I run this script, I can see that the result is true. If I change anything here, like if I change it to a small or something in the second object, then I can see the result will be false because it has not matched that. Number 6, implement a memoization function in the JavaScript. This is my favorite because it has to do with the algorithm. Memoization is a technique where function remembers the response of intermediate computation, it store it, then it uses in the next set of instructions. So it's like a cache, and we are going to implement a recursive Fibonacci series example using a memoization function memoiz, inside which we are going to have a cache object. Then we are going to return another function from this memoiz function, and we are going to take the keys of the arguments that are passed, and then we are checking if a cache has that key present, then return the value for that key. So it's simply like if there is a value for a particular element in the cache, then return it. If there is not a value, then create a new entry for that key and store that value there and return that result. Now let's apply this for the Fibonacci example. Then we will call the memoiz Fibonacci, and we'll pass a function which is our Fibonacci for the memoization, and the memoized Fibonacci, if we pass a value 5, then we get output 5, and if we pass 8, then we get output 21. If I again call it with the value 5, I will get a cache result. Number 7, create a deep clone of an object. So this is very common question in the JavaScript. So let's say we have object like this and we have to create a deep clone of this. So what we can do is we can use the first approach, which is JSON pass and JSON stringify. So it converts the JSON object to a string and then again pass it to a JSON. So with this way we can get an output. But the problem with this approach is it doesn't clone the properties which are undefined or null. So in our case, you can see that the new was undefined and it has not been reflected into our result. You can use it if you don't want undefined or the null properties in your object, but if you want to preserve them, then object assign is the solution for you. Number 8 is to implement our own custom set timeout and set interval function. So to accomplish this, we can make a use of a request animation frame method of a JavaScript event loop. So custom set timeout, it has an callback function, what set of instruction or which method has to invoke, and the delay, after what delay it has to perform. Then we are going to capture a current time, and then we are going to implement a tick function, which basically will check if the elapsed time is a what if elapsed time is a greater than or same as the delay, and that's what we are comparing here. If it's greater than the delay, then we are going to call the function. If it is not, then we are going to request an animation frame from the event loop, and there we are again going to compute what is the elapsed time and the current times difference. For the custom set interval, we can do a same strategy, and the only difference is here, instead of the difference, we are checking that the elapse is the greater than equal to an interval, not the delay but the interval, and we are calling the callback function each time. Number 9, write a function to check whether the string is palindrome or not. So this is very easy one. So what we can do is we have to check if the string is palindrome or not. So we simply accept a string in our palindrome function. We'll convert it to a 2 lowercase, so that make all the character in a lowercase, and then we'll split initial string, we'll reverse it, again we'll join it. So technically what we are doing is we are simply reversing that string, and we are checking if that is equal to our original string or not. Final one, number 10, is that what will be the output for this code. So we have a array A and we have array B, both are constant, and what we are doing is then we have assigned array A to a C, and when I do a console log A equals to B equals to B, and then equals equals to B, which is a type check, what will be the output of this thing? Let me tell you what is the intention here. So when we do a equals to B, it will return a false, reason being both the value of the arrays is same. In the memory they are represented as a different offset, that's why it will be false. Similar goes with triple equals to, even though we are checking their types will be same, but they are different in a memory, so the output will be false for the second case. In the third case and the fourth case, we'll get output as a true. The reason being, we are assigning a directly to a C, and there we are giving a reference of a. So we are not creating a deep copy like I was showing in the before. We are just giving a reference and a shallow copy, and that will return output for the true. So the output of this will be finally false, false, true, true. So that's it for this video. This was for the beginner level interview question. These were not that much tricky, but if you want to practice it more, then let me know. I'll create a content on the more advanced and the more complex JavaScript interview questions. Thank you for watching.